Okay, this is VK7RRR, the club station of the Radio and Electronics Association of Southern Tasmania with our DATV Experimenters Night. And we've got Clayton VK7ZCR and Scott VK7HSE in the green room, along with a number of other club members. So in our virtual club gathering via Zoom, and thank you to Hayden for this facility. And tonight the focus is on DSTAR. So I'll hand over to Clayton and Scott to take us through all about DSTAR, and over to you guys.
Okay, well I'll take it first. So if I go croaky, you can grab it there, Scott. I'll do a screen share because that's probably the best thing to do to show people a little bit about what DSTAR is. That should do. Okay, that's the DSTAR.org.au webpage. It's actually hosted by the Victorian DSTAR group. It lets you know that DSTAR is digital smart technology for amateur radio systems, and basically it's digital voice over the FM or radio or whatever you like to call it, which is linked through the internet, and it's designed for doing voice or digital data. Originally, the idea was to be able to supply a limited amount of internet data to people, so they could send things like, apart from voice, you could send emails to people out in the field and that over the radio, rather than actually rely on mobile phones and that in emergency situations.
Okay.
One of the big things they use it for in America is if they're doing a flyover in a helicopter, they used to have to stop the helicopter, go down to the ground, get a satellite dish out to send pictures of the fireground, so back to the headquarters. So what they do now with DMR, they can actually send a picture across the radio without having to do that. So they don't just go for the local amateur repeaters.
Cool.
And it also increases the efficiency of the bandwidth, so there's not like you're using 5 kc rather than 25 kc, so you can have more radios, a little bit like digital TV, where you can have more on the same amount of frequencies.
Yep.
There is you can use DSTAR like a repeater across town, or through a gateway, which is set up, or via a reflector. Basically, DSTAR is very similar to Echolink or IRLP, which is probably the way to explain it. You actually have what's called a reflector, which everybody logs into. I'll quickly show you my reflector. I actually run a reflector here in Hobart, which is Reflector 91 Charlie. That's what the dashboard looks like, and you'll see all the people that are linked into this reflector. Now, if you put a call out through your local repeater, so for example in Hobart RCR, that's the RCR dashboard, and you'll see that at the moment there is a US news line going through it, but what happens is that goes through this, like your local 2-metre repeater, and links back to your reflector, which is 91 Charlie, the one that it's linked to. And as you can see, all the people that are actually linked in, they're actually listening there through their hotspots or via repeaters of that. So you can actually hook into a reflector by your own personal hotspot, or via a repeater or a gateway.
Yep.
And down here you'll see the people that have been calling in the last 24 hours. As you can see, we've got people from all around the world calling in.
So Clayton, is this how you can tell how many people are listening, like to the broadcast? You can look at this and say that.
What happens is we only when the broadcast is on, we only basically go by the people that call back. That's how we get our numbers. But at the moment, if you look there, there's people that are actually listening. They don't always come back. We only classify them. So at the moment, there's 23 remote users linked into the reflector in Hobart listening to it.
Okay. Now, can I just ask those people that are on the Zoom channel? Can you mute if you're not actually wanting to ask a question, so that we don't get any of the background noise? Yeah. That'd be good.
Yeah, so basically you can actually see all the different people that are logged into the reflector there. And if this is for anybody interested, you can see the IP address of the RCR repeater. So if you want to jog that IP down, you're more than welcome to look at that. That's the way to prove when you're trying to set your radio up.
Yep.
That you're not just going across town, you are actually going out over the internet, you're routing across the internet.
Okay.
So again, hit the bottom where your RF is, and then you'll see at the top here where it has CQ via 91 Charlie. So that will mean that when you're talking, you're actually going across into the reflector. So it's handy to have both the ability to see both these dashboards. So when you're setting your radio up, you know you've got to write. So for example, down here is where you've gone into the repeater, and then if you duck over here to the dashboard, you'll actually I've got to refresh it about once every minute. If you refresh it, this actually updates, but it takes about a minute after you transmit it before it shows it on it. You'll see your call sign come up here.
Okay.
Another point which is quite interesting, when you're on this dashboard and you see that sort of colour, while you click on that, it will actually bring up a Google map where that station is actually located. So there you go, that's where this one is transmitting from. So you can actually get how many miles away he is and all that. So he's transmitting from just up in Werribee. So that's another very interesting point. That's when you're on your GPS, when you set up there. So it is quite interesting when you get international stations that do it.
Clayton, can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
I'm not clear on how you got this dashboard up.
Okay, I'll give you the URL. Just type in REF 091 .DSTAR gateway.
Okay, I can see that on my screen now. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
So if you just type that address in, or you can Google it. It'll come up under Google. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
What we'll do is get all these URLs together and put them at the in the broadcast or in the video write up, so people can get to them afterwards.
Yeah, there is the different modules too. When originally when DSTAR came out, there was you locally gave out like a stack of 5 different actual physical repeaters, which meant you had module A, which used to be 2.4 gigs, and that was mainly for data, like for putting data over.
Yep.
Then there's module B, which is UHF DSTAR. Module C, which is what my 2 meter repeater is. It's a 2 meter repeaters. And I'm not sure exactly what turn E is, but that's basically how you can tell your different frequencies. So we basically use module C through this reflector, as you'll probably know, as most people are logged into that. But you can do routing through the modules on a reflector. That makes sense. So say someone's on module A, you should be able to hear them on module C and so forth. So that's because originally you had a gateway with all these modules. You're getting very similar dashboard, but different modules, and you'd actually see the different repeaters on it. So you could actually, for example, come in on UHF and go out on 2.2 gigs if they had the full-fledged repeater system.
Okay.
Back in 2014, I actually got handed a 2 meter one, probably a gateway, and I actually had the gateway with the G3 software, which I'll explain to you what that is later. But at the moment, we went into the multi-mode repeaters to make better use of the frequencies. Otherwise, you'd have just DSTAR on it, you wouldn't be able to use DMR on that frequency and all that. So basically, what it meant is you'd have one repeater doing one mode, where I think it's better used to have all the different modes. Yeah, so that's basically how all that works. I'll shoot over to here. Where are we? I've got the. That's one on after. This is also available on that website there. This is all about the newbie to DSTAR. It explains to you a lot more about it. I'll just flick through this quickly. It's basically a fair bit of reading, tells you a lot about DSTAR. The quick guide, first thing most people will have to do is actually get on and register it. Now, if you go onto my dashboard there, sorry if people are trying to follow the URLs, you go into registration, and then when you get into here, you've got to put your call sign in and register, and then they'll send you an email back with your login. And then I'll just flick back to this again. I'll try and pull up that page, because then when you get into it, you've got to put your call sign and a number in front of it. It's tricky the first time you do it. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, this is where you do your registration. Yeah, you'll see that's when you go in. You'll see that page there. And basically the original idea was to actually have most people register their main call sign, which is their home. And then if they've got a separate dongle, they would actually put their call sign with DR for it, so it's got dongle over in here. And of course you just update it as it all happens, and that's basically how you've got to get on. You need to do that, otherwise the US Trust server won't let you route through the D plus repeaters. I'm just trying to see if I can actually find the US Trust for you. I did have that up here. Yeah, I'm sorry, where did it go? It's all right. I did actually have that link up, but I can't find it right at the moment. Reflectors and DSTAR information. You can see all the reflectors around the world there. Because what you can do is with your radio, you can, say for example, go into RCR. In the bottom where you've got reflector 1, you put your call sign in. Reflector 2, you need to put RCR space G to route around the world. If you don't put the G in there, you only go across town. In where it says CQCQ, you can put the, say at the moment it's linked into reflector 91. If you go REF 091 space U, that will unlink that reflector off that repeater. Then you can say put REF 023 for example, and then you go CL, and that will actually put you into module C, which is 2 meters module, and L afterwards then link you to reflector 23. So that's how you unlink from repeaters back to repeaters on that one.
Can I ask a question there? Because I got stuck on that today.
Yep.
As I was trying to work through the ICOM 9700.
Yes.
And so I thought that I was able to connect through to a gateway just using that without going onto the RCR website. But sounds like I have to go onto RCR to do it.
Well, you can, with your repeater, you can use RCR or RAD, but what you've got to do is basically you've got to have RCR-G to make it work as a gateway, because it's got to know that you want to go out through that repeater. If you just put RCR in there, you'll just go across town.
Yes, I understand that. But with the 9700, it seemed to me that I could say I'm looking to do the gateway repeater on it and sign up through that.
So that's basically, you've got to go through a physical repeater to make it work, or a hotspot. You can use either a hotspot. There is a thing called thermal routing, but you can't, I think you can only connect, it is a very touchy thing. You've got to have someone on the other end running it, and you need a gateway, which we don't, because this is the only problem I've got with this is the only downside to the multi-mode repeaters we've got. The terminal mode won't work through them. You've got to have a gateway with G3 software on them to make that terminal mode work. And that's basically what you do. It's very similar to the call sign routing. You can say instead of in the CQCQ, you could put my call sign, and then the D plus system would actually know. Say I was in Melbourne, for example, and I called out. It would say, okay, last time that VK7RRR called, it was in Melbourne. So what it would then do is actually go and look for me, and it'd actually go and say, okay, he's in Melbourne, so we'll pop out, that will come out on that repeater, and hopefully you'll hear him. So as you can probably see by this demonstration here, how the gateway works, and like the port A and port B and C, and then that goes into the repeater through the gateway, and then out onto the internet, which is onto the reflectors there, if that makes sense to you. Yeah.
Okay, I'll have another go tomorrow.
Yeah, so basically what you need to do is put the G in there to get, so you can go out, and at the moment by default RCR is connected to reflector 91 Charlie all the time. So if you go back to that URL, if you go back to the what's the name, you'll actually see yourself come up on that screen. But once you've done it, it won't happen instantly. It takes about a minute before it actually shows. So if you do it and all of a sudden you feel it's not working, don't be surprised. It does take a couple of minutes to happen on that one. So I'll come off that. I'll go back to that. So you'll see as you update here, you'll see that change. So all I do is log into it, and then wait a minute, and then just hit the refresh button on the screen. As you can see now, there's 31 people listening on that repeater come up for the US news line. So and you can see how quick that's growing. So that's not bad to have 31 people from around the world. If you look down the left-hand side, you'll see all their call signs and so forth.
Now, How many reflectors are there in Australia? DSTAR reflectors? Two.
There's 2 reflectors in Australia.
Okay.
What happened originally, why I put 91 up, was the reflector 23 was the main reflector in Australia, and that went offline for about 6-7 months. And I had people in Melbourne saying to me, because I talked to a few people on BMR, they said, how about you get your own reflector going? Anyway, I emailed the fella, I went to this site, I sent him an email, because there's all the reflectors all around the world if you want to know, and it tells you their address and all the rest of it, so that's where you can go and find out where you connect to. But I sent him an email, and basically he said, I'm on holidays now, I'll be back in a couple of weeks, and I didn't hear any more, and I thought, okay, because what I did, I set up a Windows, a Linux box, and I gave him login to it. Anyway, I get this email back, and he just said, oh, it's all going, by the way, so the next thing I knew, I had the reflector going, so, and like I said, once he came off his holiday, he was very, very happy to help me.
Okay.
And it was really funny, 2 days after I got mine up and running, reflector 23 came back alive again after being offline for I think it was about 8 months it was offline altogether. That's why I got asked to put it up. So there is two reflectors in Australia. 23 was really the main reflector. And then, well, that was the first one there, put up by the Victorian group.
Yep.
And then obviously I put this one up at the time when I put this one up, it was the only one running in Australia. And like I said, 2 days later, the other one come back online by some miracle. Any other questions?
So that
historically, their reflector 3 was out of VK2 at Dural, but that went offline many years ago.
Right. Okay. So all those reflectors that are run elsewhere, I assume they're similar. They're similar to talk groups in that they are relating to specific sort of special interests or that sort of thing. Is that the case?
There is a little bit like that. Reflector 01 is worldwide, and that means if you go into Reflector 1, just be aware if you log into that, you probably won't get it to log out of it. It's that heavily used, you've got to have a gap to be able to log out. But basically, if you go into here, you'll find in this page here, you actually see the status like you've got, and a little bit about them. There's usually status. Certain people that they have UK nets and things like that. If you look down on the side, it gives you an idea. And so these ones in Japan, they're all G2 dongles and that's set up as DVAPs. And so on. So yeah, that gives you a fair idea what they are, where they are, Sweden, and there is certain reflectors where they actually do like hurricane warnings and weather warnings and things like that. So it's quite interesting. And there is a reflector somewhere which I actually use to talk to the International Space Station. So the best idea is to have a look at these URLs which we put down the bottom and just have a bit of a look around, and you'll see some have got like you'll see this one's only got a 100 meg link and this one's got a 1 gig link, so you'll find different qualities.
Yeah.
But RCR repeater is able to connect to any of them and RAD by just changing that CQ bit in the bottom, like you've got repeater 1, repeater 2, and Scott, you better take over, I'm losing this voice.
Oh, okay. Right, yeah, to connect to the reflector, yeah, you change the UR call field. By default it is CQ, but when you wish to link to another reflector, depending on the radio type, you essentially change, you leave the REF, then you go change the number to what you want, then the module to which you want, then ending with the letter L for linking. Once it's done that, you get a voice confirmation that that link has occurred, and then you then revert back to the CQ to continue the conversation on that reflector. Now, that list of reflectors that Clayton was showing there is only the ICOM G2/G3 reflectors. There is actually 2 DSTAR systems. We've got the original ICOM system, and you also have an open source system called IRC DDB, and that one doesn't use the US trust that Clayton mentioned earlier, and that one does not require registration for use. However, for example, if you're utilising either Clayton's 2 metre repeater or 7RAD on the hill, and you wanted to go anything external on any system that was an REF based reflector, you would need to have your call sign registered with the US Trust, or otherwise it won't pass your traffic. Now that is Clayton's touched on that process. You only got to do it once, and you only do it from one source. So, for example, I used it's going back probably nearly 10 years ago, and I didn't even have DSTAR equipment back then, but I registered through VK7RRR and got the appropriate things set up on that. What else is there? The other comment there too about the modules A through to D. Yeah, historically, as Clayton touched upon those, A was 23 centimetres, B was 70 centimetres, C was 2 metres, and D was usually local. So locally, usually just to that repeater. That was pretty much how the 4 streams used to be used. But expanding on that, I don't really want to cover into Xox Reflectors too much, but there is another system called Xox Reflectors, and they can cover up to 26 modules per reflector, so you can have A through to Z. However, again, that's a bit outside of what we're talking about here tonight.
Yep.
Now I'm a bit of a miss as to where to go from there. Is there any questions on that first before I flounder through?
Everybody's quiet.
No,
Everybody's very quiet.
that's all right. Probably just a question around availability. You sort of said any of those reflectors are available on RAD or RCR. I assume that's also RJG and...
That's correct. All the DSTAR repeaters that are listed for Tasmania, which is there's one at Richmond,
right,
which I forget the call sign of off the top of my head. There is one at obviously the Domain. You've got Lenna Valley. There is one in Launceston, and there is also one at Wynyard or Table Cape.
Okay.
Now you should be able to utilise how you access one is how you do it on all of them. It's not specific to a specific repeater.
Okay.
The process on how you connect to something via DSTAR is universal across the board. So it doesn't matter whether you're coming in on RF through a actual physical repeater or whether you're coming in via a hotspot. The process on how you link and unlink is identical.
Okay.
And it's done via the digital repeater mode. Now this is, again, it comes back to a specific thing to each radio. I'm only familiar with the ID51, which is a portable handheld style radio. That's the one I'm used to, and you don't program that one without the software. It's a nightmare.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
So that's the DR mode is digital repeater. Now most DSTAR radios actually have a full repeater list internally that can be manually updated as required. This is where the DR mode comes in, and that's where it's getting that list of information from. So, for example, that ID51 has a micro SD card slot on the side of the radio, and there's a CSV file that you can pull down from the site that Clayton showed earlier, the DSTAR.info, I believe it was, and you can actually get a refreshed list. Now that list is only the ICOM G2, G3. Now the reason why I'm saying ICOM G2 and G3 is it's different versions of the gateway software. There was G1, which was promptly replaced by G2, and then there's G3. Now not everybody upgraded to G3 because they didn't see the need, and to be honest, I have no idea what the differences are between the two versions, other than you can use this terminal mode that Clayton touched upon earlier on the G3 system.
Yeah.
You can't use that on the G2 system, and that may just be the simple difference, I don't know. That's there.
Okay.
So you can update that CSV via in this case, dropping the CSV file onto the micro SD card, going into a menu within the radio and importing, and that'll give the option if there's duplicates to overwrite and or update, whichever the case may be. The main thing with DSTAR is that there's 3 fields that it's looking at. There's what's called the UR call. In other words, you are calling, as in the station you are calling, is the connection field, so to speak, if you want to look at it in that term. You also have the gateway field, which is only relevant if you're going through an RF repeater or hotspot. And then you've got your own station call sign. And that, so the gateway side of it is only relevant on that hotspot and repeater. And you require a repeater offset for that functionality to become available. So if you've set a simplex frequency in, a repeater frequency in, and all of a sudden you're not getting the ability to edit into the gateway field, it's most likely because you haven't got the duplex split on, and that will prevent you from actually being able to edit that particular field. It's a bit of a trap with hotspots, in particular Pi-Star, in that, especially if you're running on a simplex node, you still have to actually trick the radio into thinking it's going through a repeater, but by setting a 0 offset, so that you are setting a repeater split.
Yep.
But you go into the submenu of that and you adjust the offset to 0, so it's transmitting and receiving on the same frequency. Otherwise, you don't get access to that gateway functionality. And the gateway is necessary if you wish to route through other systems across the world. If you're only wishing to chat across town, then the gateway functionality serves no purpose.
Yep.
But in the case of either RAD or RCR on 2 meters, they are both permanently linked to 91C. So if you're on the 2 meter one, you'll pipe out on the UHF one at the domain and vice versa. So, and you can also do simplex DSTAR to DSTAR.
Okay.
All that's critical there is the UR calling needs to be set to the call sign of the station that you're calling, as opposed to being on CQ. Chime in, Clayton, if that's wrong. I think that's how it works. I've never actually done a simplex.
I haven't heard
We'll have to do it one day and test it. Because I haven't done that either. So that's how I understand it from the instruction manual of the ID51, which we were going to try and touch a bit upon the 9700 as that's one of the most popular devices at the moment. Now, the manual that those 9700 users will want to download and refer to is the advanced user manual, not the standard manual. It's the advanced user manual, and that is downloadable either from the ICOM America or ICOM Japan websites. But a Google search of IC 9700 advanced user manual should give you the appropriate URL to download that with. If I remember tonight, Justin will email that to you.
That's great.
Now, I'm not sure how many people are watching at the moment are actually IC 9700 users. I've quickly gone through
Yes,
those.
I am. Yes,
Right.
yes. I have the manual.
But did it make any sense? I'm guessing not.
It made sense. So I've used the manual, and I also found a YouTube site from DL2YMR, which I found really good. I couldn't understand his German, but it was but that didn't matter because he pointed it out very clearly. So the first half of his presentation was really good, and then I got lost because he was doing some stuff that needed to understand the German. But he was www.dl2ymr.de, and he was really good, and the ICOM manual was good, but I was having trouble linking what the manual said to what Clayton was telling me earlier, because I think that the gateway and the frequency shift for the repeaters is automatically set up by the ICOM 9700.
That's correct. That's where it's referring back to that CSV file that I mentioned just a few moments ago, in that the radio by default has a list of repeaters available. So you should be able to, via the, there should be, as I say, I don't have a 9700, so I'm talking through as if I'm using my ID 51. There's a button on mine called DR, which stands for digital repeater.
Yes.
I long press that, and that brings up, and I'll just do it physically so I can actually describe what it is I'm doing at the same time instead of just trying to do it from memory. Let's turn these guys down. So yes, I long press that button, and I essentially get I'm not sure if that's going to actually be readable. No, it probably isn't. No, I think that's gone to, no, we're not going to be able to read it, the light's gone off. Basically, there's two lines that are on that particular configuration. You've got the to field and the repeater. And I can toggle through the from, which is the appropriate repeaters, and there should be one there which is just called Hobart, and then it's got 146.96250 VK7RRR. That's how you know that one is set specifically, so that goes out on 2 meters. The one at Richmond is VK7RRR, and that's on 438.125 module B. So without me even, this is radio out of the box, I haven't even attempted to program it. It'll have that particular DSTAR information already in it. Now again, that's only the ICOM systems. It's not including, for example, VK7RAD. That's where you have to manually add that yourself, and there's a few different ways of doing that, but I'm not real sure if it's really worth covering that tonight. It's probably something that I can cover on a one-to-one basis after the fact. It might be a better way to cover that. It's just a case of downloading the CSV file, and then you can actually put them in, edit, and include the other ones that you want. There's a few rules that you need to apply to that though. You can't have duplications on your import, otherwise it'll fail, and it'll just any duplications get skipped and are non-usable via the radio. What else is there? The advanced manual for the 9700 is very pictorial, is probably the best way to describe it. So there's lots of pictures in it that are literally showing you every step of the way. And the only part that lost me a little bit was the way they were describing some of the menu system, but I'm sure that would become very clear when you've actually got the radio in front of you. Because I don't have one, I was just looking at the manual and trying to make sense of what it's saying. So
Scott,
yep.
you've got a handheld, which is the ID51. There's the 9700. What else does, like, is everything that ICOM produce DSTAR capable, or how are they sort of approaching it? No,
it's not. The original 2 meter 70. Well, actually, the original DSTAR radio that came out was the IC2200H. That was a 2 meter only radio, but it was an optional extra board to purchase to actually put into that radio to make it DSTAR compatible. It was basically the AMBI chip section of the circuitry that was on the add-on board to make it digital capable.
Okay.
Then there was a data-only radio, actually a digital voice and data, which was the ID1. That was a 23 centimetre FM and DV radio.
Okay.
Primarily designed to be actually a modem. That's where Clayton touched on the internet usage side of DSTAR. It is essentially an internet gateway, radio modem, designed specifically for use on the ICOM repeater system. Again, YouTube, a couple of those, and you'll see them in action. They're actually pretty impressive bits of kit, but I'm sure they were expensive for their day. The next major player into the DSTAR realm was the ID880. That was a 2 metre 70 centimetre FM and DSTAR radio. When you get into the latter half, say the last 5 years at least of ICOM gear, most of it is DSTAR capable. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. We've got the 9700, the 7100, 5100, 4100, and there's probably one or two there I've missed. Then in the handheld range, the ID51 and the ICE92, the 92, 94, anyway, something like that.
Okay.
And the only DSTAR radio that's in existence that's commercially available that is not an ICOM is actually a Kenwood D74 handheld. I haven't actually seen one in the flesh, but I've seen them obviously on YouTube, the clips, etc. The functionality is on the DSTAR side of things exactly the same as what it is for the ICOM radios. It has to be, or otherwise it wouldn't work. So all the menus that exist in the ICOM realm exist in the Kenwood realm on that particular radio. To date, that's the only other brand that has ventured into DSTAR, which kind of touches upon the exclusivity. I can never say that word. The exclusivity of ICOM in the market, because back at the original startings of DSTAR from 1998, with the concept to 2003, when the actual DSTAR spec was kind of drawn up and said this is what it's going to be, then ICOM being brought in on board to assist with the manufacture of radios, and they kind of obviously behind the scenes there signed in some deals there where they were going to be a supplier for a certain period of time. All the patents that are relating to DSTAR have actually now expired, so there is no reason now why third parties cannot actually come in, and they still have to utilise via licence, but they can't actually start now manufacturing DSTAR equipment.
So
that said, yep.
So Scott, is that why we've seen an expansion of the hotspots, all of those sort of things? We've suddenly seen a real resurgence, I suppose, of DSTAR on multi-mode hotspots and all of that sort of stuff. Is that the reason why?
No, that's done separately again. That's done through third-party software that's essentially reverse-engineered part of the ICOM spec for those parts of it that are not open source. That was part of the beef with DSTAR, was that the whole process of it wasn't open source from go to woe. It was binary blobs that were proprietary under was it Digital Voice? I can't remember the name of the company now, but anyway, the company that produces the AMBI
chips
that are in use in the radios. So basically, what you wanted there, if you wanted to manufacture your own DSTAR radio, you had to buy that specific chip for that functionality to be a thing. You weren't allowed to know what was in the chip. You just bought the chip, which in turn was a license to utilise that chip for the intended purpose of DSTAR.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that's kind of what shot DSTAR in the foot in the early days, in that he could have got off to probably a much more brighter start than what it did, because the entry level costing to just buying a standard analog FM radio was nearly 3 times the price of a standard FM radio. So it was very expensive in the early days.
Yeah.
I suppose it kind of still is in a way. If you compare modes of what's the cheapest to get into, well, DMR is by far the cheapest because of the flood of the cheaper entry-level Chinese radios that are on the market. With DSTAR, you don't have that. You've only got 2 vendors that are actually manufacturing, and that's ICOM and Kenwood.
Yeah.
Whereas DMR is a different realm altogether. But DSTAR predates DMR by nearly 5 years. So
Yeah, okay.
And that's part of the reason why DSTAR is actually incompatible with, for example, DNR, NXDN P25, and C4FM, is because DSTAR is using GMSK, whereas the others are using quadrature modulation. So
Yep.
To cross DSTAR into any other systems and vice versa, you actually have to decompile it, squirt it across an analog link to then recompile it into the appropriate format.
In the
So
other
that's
standard,
why you can't, for example, if you're on a particular repeater or hotspot, you can't just go from one node directly to DSTAR. You have to go through, you have to host your own AMBI server to do so.
Yep.
And there's a lot of different solutions for that. So there's a couple of Bluetooth devices, a Raspberry Pi with an appropriate DV dongle, and whatnot. But that again, that's one of the fences, I suppose, around DSTAR, is that its technology is a little older.
Yep.
So in comparison, it's not as easily doable, but it is still doable. You've just got a few more fences you've got to hop over to get there.
Yep.
Which we covered that the IRCDB stuff, didn't I? Yeah, I did. That's the other thing. So you've got, as I mentioned earlier, where you've got the ICOM G2, G3 system, and then you've got the IRCDB system. Right. Well, the ICOM system is originally was the Reflectors, the REF, and then D Plus became. Clayton might need to chime in this one. D Plus was like an updated spec on the original Reflector system. Then you also have XRF reflectors, which is part of the D Plus system, and DCS reflectors. Now the DCS, in context that I know it as, is the XLX reflectors. Now, just touching very briefly on XLX, that was a system that was originally designed to cross DSTAR over to DMR. That was its initial guise of what it was for.
Okay.
And to do that, you required a local AMBI server to do so. And that's where that comes back to that A through to Z with the modules. If you had 26 pairs of AMBI chips, you could have 26 parallel conversations going on a reflector. Not that you ever would, but that's how it works. You've got to use them in pairs. And so that's where, if you ever see in reference to other systems, for example, if you're looking down the list of DSTAR related things in PyStar, you'll see this REF and then a number. Then you'll see XRF, then a number, XLX and then a number, and also DCS and a number.
Okay.
They're all reflectors. They're just different technologies, slightly on how they were implemented over the time. So it's kind of the specification of DSTAR hasn't changed that much from its original development, but it has had a few minor updates over the years. One of the major ones was the digital repeater node. The original DSTAR radios, like the original 2820, I think it was, didn't have DR mode, so you can't actually program it in the way that most of the modern ones can be. You actually physically had to put all the details of the DSTAR repeater in. You didn't have the option of importing a CSV file into it.
Okay.
So that's kind of that, I think. Anything else for Clayton can think of? You still got a voice?
Yeah, I'm still silly. That's why I'm being quiet on the side, trying to save it for what it is. Yeah, I think you've covered most of it. There was one thing, but I can't think what it was now. But basically, now we haven't got a full gateway here. Obviously, terminal mode won't work unless we put redo a full gateway. And I'm not using the ICOM repeater as such. We're using the ASU one with the called PyStar software on it, basically. So it's running like a big hotspot, to put in real terms. That's about the only other comment Mike.
So in relation, the comparison between DMR and DSTAR, given the difference, it's a different generation. Given DMR's a later take on it, like you mentioned when we had the DMR talk, that it's time division multiplexing, which is how you can have, two conversations going on at the same time. I assume that is not available to you on DSTAR, apart from having multiple modules in reflectors and that sort of thing. Is that the case? Am I reading that wrong?
Yeah, you're correct there. The DSTAR modulate bandwidth is using 6.25 kilohertz bandwidth, so it's a narrow FM mode basically.
Yeah, okay.
Whereas DMR is 12.5 kilohertz, but within that 12.5 split by 2 via the TDMA, which gives you 2 by 6.25. Whereas with DSTAR you can only have one conversation at a time on the frequency.
Yep.
But that's where the reflector comes in, and depending on how many, for example, on Clayton 91 reflector, that's got A through to E, so that's let's just do the math there. That's 5 parallel streams, so you can essentially have 5 people using 91, one on A. So if it's 2 people on A, 2 people on B, 2 people on C, and D and E, and the A and D people won't hear each other.
Yep.
So it's 5 parallel conversations through that system.
Okay.
And as I said, originally that was separated by actual amateur bands, the A through to C being 23 centimetres, 70 centimetres and 2 metres.
Yep.
But that more or less does not apply in the real world now. Actually, most of the ICOM repeaters would be getting pretty long in the tooth these days. When the WIA rolled those out, you remember when they did the club giveaways where they were rolling out DSTAR repeaters to clubs. That was about 2005, 2007, somewhere around about that time period.
That's about right.
So a lot of that gear would be getting to the point where probably most of the RF gear either is no longer serviceable or in need of replacing. Certainly seen a lot of mods where the original gateway hardware is still in place, but the RF deck for the UHF 2 meters has been replaced with either say a pair of Motorola's or taped radios, except for that kind of example, and even further modifications where some people have actually combined the best of both worlds, in that you have the G2 and G3 realm with the IRC DDB gateway running parallel on the same system now. I've got no idea how they've done that, but that's available on select repeaters around the place. It just depends who the system operator is for the appropriate repeater as to what's available on it. Most of the ones that were rolled out with that original ICOM grant were predominantly tri-band, but not all of them were. I'll give an example with 3RWN. That has got the full, which is what Reflector 23 is primarily linked into. That has the full suite of 2 metre, 70 centimetre and 2 lots of 23 centimetres. So you have one lot of 23 centimetres with a 20 meg split, which is for voice, and then you have what is in effect a simplex frequency gateway for the data side of things. Now, again, the only radio that I'm aware of that will do DSTAR data is that ID1, and they are let me get the words out. They are very rare to come across, even on the second-hand market. Those that have got them realise what they're worth, and they're not letting go.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much that, I believe.
So
time.
a question. We're going okay. That's great. The traps for young and not so young players. given your collective experience with DSTAR, what are the sort of the common things or the common mistakes that people make using DSTAR?
That would probably be when you're linking a reflector. If you forget to go to CQ after you've done your linking, what will happen is the other person will still hear you, but every time you let go of your button, you get a voice announcement confirming the action that you've just transmitted. So, for example, you've put a link to say, I want to connect to Reflector 91 Bravo. Yeah. And you let go of your button after saying what you've said, and all of a sudden you get a little beep, and you'll get a reflector connected too. And you're like, and then that's coming over the top of the other station voice, and it gets a bit messy. So there is that side of it.
The other thing which is a problem, which is a problem for people using FM, not FM, the repeaters, is a lot of people used to leave their GPS beeping every 2 seconds or something on for their APRS. So, and of course, when that data goes across the repeater, it wipes everybody else out. Yeah. We don't seem to have that problem anymore, but that used to be a problem originally where people would use their GPS option in it. It's fine if you set it up so it transmits when you transmit, but they'd leave it as a beacon, and so basically what would happen is every minute or whatever you get a piece of data go across the repeater. Apart from driving people nuts, it kept wiping people out when they was talking. Where the best way to do that is set it up so your GPS data only comes out when you're actually transmitting, and that way, when you put your call out or talk to someone, then your data will come out through it. But that used to be a real problem back in the early days where you'd have someone talking and then going crook because all of a sudden they broke up because there was someone else transmitting over them. Because people would leave their radios switched on and they'd be away from their vehicles for 2 or 3 hours. And that 2 or 3 hours they'd beep me out every 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And they didn't realise that was another real trap, but that seems to have sorted itself out pretty well now.
Okay. So
that's actually a site that I didn't cover actually is DPRS, which is a DSTAR implementation of APRS. So most DSTAR radios by default have an inbuilt GPS receiver.
Okay.
And those that didn't had the ability to obviously have an external source fed into them. And yes, you can essentially send out a position packet. Your position, if you choose to send it, is actually encoded in your transmission. Whereas instead of, for example, like an APRS packet, your station has to transmit every time you want to update your position, whereas DSTAR is dynamic in that it's encoded within the data stream of your voice as you're talking. So if you were mobile whilst you're talking, your position will be updated whilst you're keyed.
Yep.
However, that data does not pass through some hotspots. That's another way to filter it out if you're going through a hotspot.
So,
what have we pulled up there?
So, Scott, with DPRS, is there a DPRS to APRS gateway somewhere that's...
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Yes, that's covered by... Oh, crikey, what's his name? I used to run his software, but I haven't run it for years. Just trying to think. You've got Java APRS, which is a server-based internet server for what at one stage what most of the tier 2 servers used to run before most switched over to APRS-C. But yes, there is a Java applet that hooks in with the APRS realm to convert DSTAR data on the DSTAR network and inject it into the APRS network.
Oh, cool.
It was only ever a one-way street though. You didn't go from APRS to DPRS.
Yeah, okay. All right.
That's what these are here on the... When you go to the reflector, you'll see they're highlighted like that.
Yep.
That means they've actually... in the red there, that's what the red colouring is. It means that station has transmitted its DPRS information at the same time. And that also comes out on the... through the APRS network, so you can actually see if you went in and put his call sign in on the web page, you'd actually pick it up on that. Because if you go into the APRS website, you'll actually see where the repeater's sitting, because they do transmit that out.
Okay. So I've got a simple question. I hope. One of the things. So you decide you want to, your foray into DSTAR, and you buy an ID51 handheld, and you get it out of the box, and it's all nice and charged up, and will it work straight out of the box?
Yes and no.
That's right. Depends on how much. Yeah.
Okay.
I want to use your software.
Explain yes and no.
If you just wanted to, I think I'm talking over you, Clayton. Sorry. If you were just wanting to use Clayton's 2 meter repeater, yes, because that will already be in the digital memory of the radio.
Okay.
If you wanted to utilise RAD, then no, you'd have to program that into the radio.
Right. Okay.
That's where. That's kind of really another topic, really, is manipulating a CSV file to include local data that's not included in the ICOM data. I've done it with my radio, so that, for example, the hotspots I've got sitting here all have their own individual listing under the DR mode, so that I can actually connect to whatever it is I want without having to go through and actually set up an individual channel per what it is I want to connect to. It gets very messy very quickly with ICOM software. Yeah,
but what I'm hearing, Scott, is those people who have their 9700s, they would, that RCR would be in their 9700s.
Correct.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it just for the 9700 users who are on channel. Then RCR is probably, certainly at least around Hobart, is probably a good starting point, because it is already in the radio.
Yeah, that's correct. They've just got to put their own course on in the radio, so it works, and obviously go through that way.
Okay.
And local too, so that'll only be across town, but that's fine to start with. That gets you on air.
Yeah, and they do have to register, I assume, or they don't have to register if they just want to go do local contacts.
It's not mandatory to register.
Okay.
It doesn't hurt to, because then if for whatever reason you decide one day, I want to have a bit of a chat with somebody outside the country, or whatever, then you've got the choice. Now, you've got a particular mob of people who seem to think that by registering on this system, you're giving away all your personal details and whatnot. You're giving them your call sign is pretty much all you're doing. Because essentially in the background of it, the US trust system is essentially a combination of Bind9, which is a DNS server, and name server, and Postgres. So it's got the database set out in a Postgres table, and it routes your call sign to the last known injected point IP that your radio came through. So,
okay.
That's what it internally references. So that's all it's doing, and it's not doing anything sinister with your call sign. But again, it's not essential to register. Simply enabling digital repeater mode and selecting the repeater to RCR. It's got a whole sub things of Asia, Australia, Oceania, US. There's a whole heap of listings there, and underneath that it gives you the repeater listings. There's also, if you did have GPS on and you'd managed to get a lock, you can also do what's nearby, and it'll actually give you a list of repeaters of what is nearby. Now, on that site where you can actually get the CSV file from that DPRS info, when you go through the process of downloading an updated CSV file, you've got a section there where you can select a percentage of FM repeaters.
Okay.
So it'll sacrifice a few digital voice repeaters that are well outside your local coverage area, and you could set 50-50. You want 50% digital repeaters, 50% FM, and it'll go and give you a list of that. Now, you do usually do it by a reference of in the case like you use the City of Hobart, and it'll go and pull in the data of what's available in Hobart, and then expand it out to several thousand kilometres around that.
Yep.
So you can customise that repeater list fairly right down to what you want, or you can cut it down to almost nothing. If you don't want the whole worldwide stuff in your radio, then you can cut it right down. But by default, it's all in there. And again, it's all the ICOM maintained systems, not all the third-party MMDVM, IRC, DDB systems.
Okay.
Just a quick comment. If you don't register and use the gateway mode through, like if you went into RCR and you're just using it across town and you're not registered and you're not going for the gateway, you can't have an issue where someone overseas can come straight over the top of you because they won't hear you. So basically, what would happen is, say I come in through 91 Charlie, because you're not actually going out through the gateway, I won't know that you're on RCR, and I'll just totally demolish you. So it's not someone being rude; they won't, because they won't hear you.
They're not aware of you. There. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
That explains a conversation that I heard on 23C the other day, where I was literally only getting half the conversation because the one person was in exactly that same boat. One person was registered, one person wasn't, and because I was coming in via a hotspot, I'm essentially seen as external traffic. So I wasn't getting the local RF traffic that was happening on 3RWN on that particular day.
Okay. Cool. Well, I might open it up. Any questions? And I'll just remind people they can come in via obviously the Zoom session, but they can also come in via the YouTube chat channel if you're watching via the YouTube stream. And we've got Richard and John Clark on the YouTube stream. 3807 is I'm listening on, and also Repeater 2 I'm listening on as well. So
I dropped the Reflector 91 off the RAD tonight so that you'd have DMR priority.
Oh, okay.
I'll link it back up after we've finished.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. I am going through my hotspot though, so but that'll be the AR news.
If anybody's
news line
in range of RAD on DMR, and if it's on DSTAR mode, then they're not going to know that there's something happening.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
That's the downside of a multi-mode repeater. You've only got one mode.
Yeah. VK7VH, VK7 OTC. Go ahead.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you very much for the presentation, both Clayton and Scott. Very well done. It's joined some dots for me. Justin, I love the earrings. Very pretty. My question is, two questions. Firstly, if I register and I presume then, if I wanted to make a contact, say, into the US, I can do that from, say, VK7RRR to a HF gateway in the US. That's the first question. The second question is, when I register, is it possible to make sure that my location details are not disclosed so someone can have a look at my house on Google Maps?
Who wants to take that?
Okay, first question I'll say, the ones I've been flashing up, basically that won't come up unless you've got your GPS running in your radio. The other has to be on the UK Trust. I've never seen anybody's address on it, but I'm not saying it doesn't happen. But like I said, that other only happens if you run the
DPRS.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to get my tongue around it. And I've got a very short tongue, so when I get words like that, it hurts. But like I said, as far as on the UK Trust site, I've never seen any where you can click on it to see someone's house or their address or anything like that, as far as I can remember. Have you actually seen anybody there, Scott?
No, the only bit of a giveaway that might be if you're not running DPRS, some people there's a comment field that you can that gets sent as text when you're transmitting. For example, on mine, I've got my name and then I've got a QRA locator. anything that gets put into that text field, if you were to put your full-blown address, if you could fit it in the character limit, I think it's 32 characters, then obviously, yes, you're going to transmit that over the air. But as far as that clickable link, that's only doable if you're actually sending a valid GPS position. And of course, the GPS can be switched off. It's not mandatory to have it on.
Most people leave it off.
Okay, VK7VH, VK7OTC. How's that, Vince?
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much, Clayton. Thank you very much, Scott. Great stuff, and it's joined the dots. And thank you so much indeed. And thanks, Justin. I'd love to know where you get those earrings from. Cheers. Thanks.
No problems, Vince. No problems at all. Any further questions where I repeated two? Over. Okay, nothing heard. I'll try 3807 and see whether we've got anybody on there. Just stand by. VK7 OTC via VK7TW for VK7 OTC on 3807. Any questions for our DSTAR presentation tonight? Over. Okay, just hang on.
HW's coming in.
And very nice presentation tonight, and really appreciate it. Cheers, VK7HW.
VK7HW, VK7 OTC. No problems at all, Herman. Thanks for being on the stream and also calling in via 3807. And have a good night. Any further questions via talk group 3807? Over. No, nothing heard. And I don't have any questions via the chat channel, so I think we'll wrap it up at that. Thank you very much, Clayton and Scott. And I hope, Clayton, you feel you feel a bit better in due course, and the news is good after enduring the brain swab. So thank you very much to Scott and also to Clayton and all our listeners and watchers tonight. We had I think at our peak about 11 or 12 on the actual Zoom watching the presentation. So thank you very much to Clayton and Scott, and thank you to all who are here. And we go back to our Working from the Shack tours, Working from the Shack interviews and tours next week. And next week is Peter Dodds, VK7 KPC from up north. And Peter's an RF engineer, retired from Air Services Australia, as well as he has a number of other interests. So it should be an absolutely fascinating interview and talk next week. So 73, stay safe, and what we'll do is put I'll get those URLs and I'll put them together with the write up for the video, and the video will become available in the next day or so up on the YouTube channel. So.
It's almost instantaneous, actually.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, it takes a couple of hours of encoding, but anyway, we'll if you can shoot those URLs through, I'll make sure they're included in the write up. So thanks, Scott. Thanks, Clayton, and thanks everyone. 73.
Can I just say one thing before we go?
No, go, Clayton.
I just put in for people who want to actually see if they can hear the repeater here. I do the Australian news on Sunday morning on 91 Charlie, which will go out through RCR and RAD, and the US Newsline obviously Wednesday night goes out through it. I know it's a bit of a plug, but it's a good way if you want to know if you can actually hear the repeater or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I monitor it most of the time, so if you need questions asked, just put a shout out.
Fantastic. That's great. Thank you, Clayton. All right, 73 to all online. We'll call it quits at that, and stay safe. Cheers.